Hello there, my name's Scott and today I'm going to be doing a review on what I think is pronounced the Xvostick, which I received from mini-ecig.com. Before I start though, I must point out I did receive it free of charge for the purpose of conducting a review, but my opinion of the product remains true, honest and accurate as always. Okay, let's go straight ahead and show you in a bit more detail. Okay, so here I have what I think is pronounced the Xvostick. I'm not too sure on that though, I'm probably wrong, so I think just to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to refer to it as stick. Now this is a variable wattage device that uses the DNA40, and I'm not going to spend too much time on the DNA40 side of things. I've already covered that in past reviews, and it seems really pointless just going over the same old ground again and again and again. But if you did want to have some more sort of technical info with regards to the DNA40, then here is a quick splash screen. And also I would highly advise you go along and check out P. Bizzardo's review of the DNA40. It's a two-part review, so there's two videos. They are quite long, but it is very interesting though. And at the same time, you can also marvel at Phil's wonderful tan. Okay, so like I mentioned, the stick or Xvostick uses the DNA40. So this means you have variable wattage going up to 40 watts. You go nice and low with the resistance of your coil, and you also have the temperature control. Now, temperature control side of things is still a little bit on the glitchy side, there's no two ways about it, but if you can look past those glitches, it does actually work quite well. For example, I've got this currently set up with my K-fan light. I've got a nickel coil in now, I think it's reading 0.15 ohms. Got the temperature set to 450 degrees Fahrenheit at 20 watts. And it's a really nice vape like this, you know, getting plenty of vapour, plenty of flavour, nice throw hit. Plus also have the added benefit of knowing I'm not going to get a nasty dry burnt taste if I don't notice that my juices run too low. So like I said, you know, if you can look past the slight glitches with regards to the temperature control, it does actually work quite nicely. So this is made out of aluminium or aluminum if you're in America, and it's then been anodized. This is the black version. I think there's also going to be a blue option as well. And you can also choose between having 303 grade stainless steel buttons and battery end cap or brass. So I think the stainless steel option is around $10 more. It's a nice sort of compact device. You can see I've got quite big old hands admittedly, but you know, my hand is covering pretty much the whole device as well as the atomizer as well, because the atomizer sort of actually goes inside the actual mod, which obviously helps to reduce the overall length. With regards to the length, from top edge there to the bottom edge there, it's 80 millimeters. Straight across, it's 49 millimeters. And at the widest point here, I'm measuring at around 27 millimeters. Build quality wise, it's very solid, very sturdy. All the parts that screw together very nice and smoothly. A little bit awkward with regards to the battery end cap and using the buttons sometimes, and I will go through that later on because I have got big old hands. But you know, build quality wise, it just feels like a very solid and sturdy device that should last you a long time as long as you look after it. There's only one thing I'm not too keen on, and that's to do with how they've implemented the screen. And again, I will go through that in a little bit more detail as we progress. Okay, so let's give you a bit of a guided tour and show you some of the nice features, and also talk about some of the slight negatives that I've encountered. On top, we're going to find the battery end cap, and this takes an 18650 battery, by the way. And to install the battery, you're just going to insert it positive ending first, then grab hold of the battery end cap and screw it all the way down. As you can see, you have these two cutouts, and these are basically to allow you to get your fingers in there, which in turn makes it a little bit easier when it comes to unscrewing it or tightening it up. And you also have two ventilation holes, so if you was very unlucky and had a battery venting gases, those gases can escape. One thing I'm not too impressed about is these markings at the base of the cutouts. You can see there's lots of little circles there. Now, it could be a pattern, it's meant to be there by design, but I think it's actually part of the sort of the milling process. Now, it is worth pointing out that this is a pre-production version. Hopefully on the full production version that will be addressed, because you know, it doesn't look overly neat and tidy. This section here is where you're going to install your atomizer, and this has a diameter of 23.5 millimeters. So that means you can use any atomizer as long as it's 23 millimeters or less. Right down the bottom you have a threaded 510 connection with a brass centre pin, and just above that a small grub screw. Now let's say for example you've screwed your atomizer in there and it won't fire up because the centre pin of your atomizer won't make contact with the centre pin down there. What you can do is loosen off that little grub screw, spin the disc to raise it up or lower it down, then tighten the little grub screw back up again, make your adjustments, and then hopefully you can get a good contact, and the atomizer will then start to fire up. So although the actual centre pin itself isn't adjustable, the outer disc is, so you can raise it up or lower it down to always make sure you're going to get a good solid contact. The main body is made up of 2 individual parts. It does have a really sort of solid and sturdy feel about it, and you will find some laser etching where it says Xvostick and also the company logo. On the opposite side, you're going to find a USB charging port and status indicator light. So let's say, for example, you can't be bothered to remove the battery and put it in the proper charger. All you need to do is grab hold of a USB cable, plug it in there, plug the other end into your PC, and that's it will start charging the batteries for you. You're going to find this sort of sash going across the top here, which is obviously going to be great for protecting the atomizer if you did have to drop this on the floor. And then just below that, you're going to find this sort of section which houses your electronics and obviously your main power button and also your up and down buttons. Now this section is quite easily removed if you sort of take it all apart, obviously. And it all comes out as one big sort of block. So let's say, for example, in the future you broke it or it needed to be repaired or serviced. I'd imagine it's going to make things nice and simple because you can just sort of slide that whole block of electronics out, slide a new one in, and that's it, you should be good to go. The buttons themselves, when I first saw this, I thought they're in the wrong place. I thought they needed to be up here, so when I'm holding it, I can sort of operate it with my finger. And I thought I wouldn't enjoy it them being down the sort of bottom end here, but they work extremely well. The actual throw is almost sort of non-existent, very easy to activate. The switches themselves have got a nice sort of spongy feel, but also a slight clickiness. It's like a nice mixture of the two. And just very, very responsive. What you can do is actually just sort of hold the micro stick in your hand, not worry about where the actual button is, just sort of squeeze your hand together, and that's it, will start firing up your atomizer. So for me, the actual placement and also the feel of the buttons really is top notch basically. On the base, you're going to find the screen for the DNA40, and these are really nice little screens. They give you lots of information, such as your battery life, what temperature control you've got it set to, the resistance of your coil, what wattage you're currently running at, etc, etc. But the slight gripe I have here is how they've actually implemented the screen. Not too sure how well it's going to be picked up on the camera, but the screen actually can be pushed in by quite a few millimeters, probably sort of, a good couple of millimeters anyway. And it almost feels as though there's actually nothing protecting the screen either. Now, when I first got this, I wrote off to the manufacturer and I said, look, lovely little device, but what's going on with the screen? I think you've forgotten to put a sort of screen protector on there and it's not sort of fixed in place. And then they wrote back to say it's actually like that by design. Now, their sort of logic behind it was, if you put this down on a flat surface and say, for example, there's a little bit of dirt or some sort of debris on the table, which then comes in contact with the screen, it's then going to push the screen in rather than actually causing it to crack. Now, I can sort of understand that logic, but for me personally, I would much prefer to have a sort of solid, toughened glass screen protector there, so it was sort of fixed permanently in place. Now, what I'm going to do is take off these 3 screws just so I can give you a better idea of how they've actually sort of implemented it. Okay, so now I've removed the base plate, you can get a good idea of how they've installed the screen here. Now with the DNA40 boards, you're going to get the actual board itself, and then coming off that board will be a long sort of thin ribbon cable, and attached to the other end will be the screen. And they've obviously installed the board inside here, and folded the screen over, or the ribbon cable over, and placed a small square of foam underneath it to act as a sort of shock absorber, I suppose. Now this works perfectly fine. I've got no issues on this sort of side of things. Where my issue is to do with the other 2 pieces that you can see down there. Because the actual screen protector is just a very sort of thin piece of, or plastic I suppose, but it's very sort of thin. There's no sort of sturdiness to it whatsoever. And that just sort of slots into the actual base plate there. Now I think it'll be a lot better if that was a piece of like Gorilla Glass or something like that. Something nice and tough basically. And for it to be actually fixed in position, and in that way, you're not going to get all that sort of excessive movement. Because if there's movement there, it means there's going to be gaps, and if there's gaps, that means that water, dust, dirt, etc., can easily make its way into where all the electronics are. Now, in its defence, though, I will say that for the last sort of week and a half now, I've been doing my house, and I'm an old plasterer, and I've been plastering all the kitchen, and been in an extremely dusty environment. And the Xvostick is what I've been using. It's been in the kitchen with me when I'm working as well. It's been absolutely covered in crap, and it does actually seem to be quite dust free, so maybe my concerns are actually nothing to worry about. One thing I really like is just how easy it is to screw the atomizers into place. You can literally just drop it in there, start turning, and it finds the thread straight away. Really nice. Okay, so that is the Xvostick, or stick for short. Let's go ahead, see what it vapes like. Okay, so that was the Xvostick, and what I'll do now is go ahead and show in action. So I'm going to be using it with a Kaifen light. I've got a nickel coil build in there at the moment, so I'm using it in the temperature control mode. The resistance of the coil is 0.15 ohms, got it set to 20 watts, and the temperature is set to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And I've got the tank filled up with some lemon meringue pie flavoured e-liquid. It's some sort of homebrew DIY liquid. It's 80% VG, 20% PG, once again those mixed up, and it's roughly 6 milligram strength. Okay, so this is the stick. Okay, so I've not got this set up to produce big clouds of vapour. I'm using it in the sort of temperature control mode, but nevertheless, it's still getting a really nice amount of vapour out of it. Obviously, just bear in mind that the amount of vapour you're going to get will come down to what sort of atomizer you're going to be using, the resistance of the coil, the wattage you got it set to, the type of e-liquid. All those things do play a very big part in the vapour production, but nevertheless, for this setup here, still getting plenty of vapour. Okay, so talk about the build quality now. It's a really nice solid device. It feels good in the hand as well. It feels like it's something that's going to sort of last you a long time, as long as you look after it, obviously. My only sort of slight criticisms with regards to the build quality is the finish on the battery end cap, where you have the two little cutouts. You can see lots of little circles, and at first, if you sort of have just a quick glance at it, it almost looks like it's a it's meant to be there as though it's like a pattern, but if you look closely, you can see that the actual circles are quite sort of, excuse me, they're quite sort of sporadic, so it doesn't look like a sort of set pattern, so to speak. And I can only imagine it's the marks made from maybe where they sort of, those cutaways have been sort of milled out. So this is the pre-production version, as far as I'm aware anyway. So hopefully on the production versions, that will be addressed. It's only a little thing, but nevertheless, if you're paying out a lot of money for something, you want it to look spotless, basically. Other slight quibble for me is the screen. Now, I can understand what they're saying with regards to the screen and having that sort of movement there. So if you did happen to put it down on your desk and there was something on your desk that you didn't notice, and that makes contact with the screen, rather than sort of cracking the glass and maybe damaging the screen, it's actually going to sort of push the screen inside rather than sort of cracking it. And I can understand that, but for me personally, I would much rather have like a bit of sort of toughened glass there, which was actually fixed in place. So, if you did sort of put it down on something, it's just going to sort of tilt rather than sort of push inwards. Because if you have got those gaps there, so I can push that, and you get like probably about sort of 2 or 3 millimeters of movement going inwards. And if you have got that sort of movement there, then the chances are over time you are going to get sort of dust and maybe moisture in there, which, if you've got electronics, is not really the ideal sort of thing to have there. But like I said though, in its defence, I'm sort of currently in the process of moving house or selling my house, and so I've been doing a lot of sort of decorating and plastering and rendering out over the last sort of last 2 weeks now, just to sort of try and tighten it up a little bit so I can get a sale. And when you're plastering, if anyone's ever done any plastering before, it's a very, very messy job. Everywhere gets sort of covered in dust, and I've had this with me. I've had it in my pocket, I've had it on the side. It's been covered in paint, it's been covered in plaster, and to be fair, no dust has actually seemed to have got inside that sort of screen area. When I took that that section off to have a look as I was recording the review there, or the close-up shots for the review, I wasn't expecting to see quite a bit of sort of dust in there, but there was like nothing. So maybe my concerns, are sort of unfounded, but ideally, me personally, I still prefer to have just a sort of solid piece of glass that's actually sort of fixed in position there. I think it just sort of it just makes it feel nicer basically. But you know, other than that though, you know, the marks on the battery end cap and the screen sort of moving around a little bit, you know, it still does stay nice and straight though, by the way. There's no sort of movement of the screen once it's actually all put together, but it's just that you can sort of push it inwards. But other than that though, it's a really nicely made device. Uses the an 18650 battery, and in the past with the sort of DNA20 and the DNA30, I always found that the battery life, you know, was never that particularly great. But I think with the DNA40, the battery life just seems to last almost sort of twice as long. Maybe I'm just sort of imagining it, but it definitely seems that all the DNA40 devices that I've used now, the battery life lasts a hell of a lot longer. But I think that's because it cuts off a lot later now, whereas before, and I think it used to cut off maybe, don't quote me on this, but probably around sort of 3.6 volts, 3.7 volts, whereas now I think it goes right down to about sort of 3.2 volts, if my memory sort of serves me correctly. Because I know that because when you put it on the charger, it takes a lot longer to charge now. And you also see that when you put it on, like my charger has like 3 little lights, you know, so if it's flashing 1 light, it means the battery's almost flat, 2 lights is halfway there, 3 lights is sort of almost fully charged. And with the DNA40, when I've put the batteries on now, you know, it always starts off with the first light sort of blinking, which shows that it has taken it down a lot further now. You know, which I think is a good thing because it means you're getting a lot longer battery life out of it. So, you know, battery life for me has definitely improved with the DNA40. If you're just going to use it as a standard sort of variable wattage device, the DNA40 works perfectly. There's absolutely no issues with it whatsoever, none that I've really come across anyway. The only sort of slight issues that you might get would be in the sort of temperature control mode, where it can sort of be a little bit glitchy at times. Sometimes you have to sort of take the atomizer off and reset it and muck about with it a little bit. But for the most part, I'd say it does work quite well. It's not like the most accurate one, as sort of proven in Phil's review of the DNA40. But if you sort of ignore the accuracy side of things and just sort of think, well, I'm going to do a little bit of experiment, find out what the temperature is where my sort of cotton starts to scorch, set it a little bit below that, and then just do your wattage as normal, and then just sort of enjoy a nice vape, then it works perfectly fine in that sense. So, you know, DNA40 definitely sort of boosted on the old battery life. The variable wattage side of things works perfectly fine. And the temperature control side of things, it does work, but a little bit on the glitchy side. Now, in the close-up shots, I mentioned about the buttons, and the buttons, when I first took this out of the sort of jiffy bag, I was expecting the buttons to be up here because that just sort of feels like that's where you'd normally find them at the top. So I was quite surprised to see them down at the bottom now. But they work extremely well. Really nice buttons to use or switches to use. And you can just sort of like, I can even sort of put that into the palm of my hand. And you just sort of give your hand a little bit of a squeeze and it fires up every single time. So for me, the buttons, it doesn't really matter about the sort of actual placement of it. You know, you can hold it in your right hand with your finger sort of over the top of the button, or you can spin it around so the button's in your palm of your hand. Same with your left hand as well. Give your hand a bit of a squeeze and it fires up every single time. Slight sort of negative with the buttons though is that they are sort of all quite close together, and if you've got big old hands like myself, you know, when you're trying to make those changes, or especially sort of push the 2 buttons down together at the same time, you know, if you're in the sort of temperature control mode, you want to change temperature and things like that, it can be a little bit fiddly. You know, even trying to use sort of 2 separate fingers can be a little bit awkward as well. But if those maybe a little bit sort of further down, maybe a tiny little bit further apart, it'd be a little bit easier. I think if you've got smaller hands than my sort of abnormally large hands, I think you'd be perfectly fine though. But, you know, the switch and the buttons, you know, really are very nice to use. Aesthetically, it's one of those ones where it's not a head turner, but it's not sort of pig ugly either. It's just sort of a relatively nice looking device. For me, this is more sort of practical rather than something that's going to sort of, you know, like I said, be a head turner. I like the fact that it has got that nice sort of small form factor. Even though it is using the 18650 battery, I like the fact that the atomizer sort of gets, you know, or 3/4 of the atomizer, you know, actually goes inside the device, which again, you know, keeps the overall size nice and small and compact. It goes great in your pocket, great in your hand as well, and it's also got a nice little bit of weight to it as well. Not really too sure what else I can tell you about it. Plus, I can see my battery's running out. I've got about 1 minute left, and I don't want to sort of running out of battery. So I think I'll probably wrap it up there. If you do fancy trying these out for yourself, go along to mini-ecig.com. Thank you very much for watching. Also come along and visit the website at e-cigreviews.com. That's e-cig-reviews.com. Cheers guys, happy vaping. See you later.